Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is out now in cinemas, and here's a full spoiler review.
You're fighting to save an ideal that doesn't exist.
Is Dead Reckoning Part 1 an adrenaline-pumping Tom Cruise stunt bonanza? Is it better than Indiana Jones and a Dial of Destiny? But more importantly, is it better than its predecessor, Mission Impossible Fallout? No, I don't quite think it is. If you separate Dead Reckoning from the Mission Impossible franchise and compare it to the current films out in cinemas, such as The Flash, Indiana Jones, Elemental, or Transformers Rise of the Beasts, it's the best film by a long way. There is, however, one key aspect of the film that holds it back from being as good as Mission Impossible Fallout, and that is the villain of the movie. So first a quick summary on the plot, and then on to the strengths and weaknesses of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Your days of fighting for the so-called greater good are over.
So we have an experimental AI developed by the US, and this AI has gone rogue. It's referred to as the Entity, and can infiltrate defense systems, financial markets, and is possibly becoming sentient. All the intelligence agencies across the world want to control the AI as it has the ability to dominate the world. The Entity can calculate and adjust to the likelihood of millions of different outcomes, meaning that it's basically a future predicting 4D chess algorithm. Ethan Hunt believes that no man should have the power of the Entity and hunts, no pun intended, well, pun slightly intended, for a key that potentially unlocks a way to control or destroy the AI. The Entity is using Gabriel and his henchwoman Paris, Isai Morales and Pom Klementieff to do its bidding, and Ethan, Gabriel, Paris and the US intelligence agency all chase after the AI's key. Grace, played by Hayley Attwell, pickpockets a key from Ethan, and after a few chase and fight sequences, Ilsa Faust is killed by Gabriel, who predicted exactly how events that night would play out. The final third of the film involves the White Widow, played by Vanessa Kirby, Gabriel, Paris and Grace, who has replaced Ilsa as the newest member of the IMF. And all except Ethan get aboard a train where the White Widow is due to sell the key. Grace is about to be shot, and in comes Ethan Hunt to save the day. After jumping off a mountain, he parachutes into the train. Hunt and Gabriel fight on top of the train, and Hunt steals the key from Gabriel, and they both manage to escape the train. Setting up the final clash, where the AI's weakness, or a way to control it, will be revealed in Dead Reckoning Part 2. I know that this film will be enjoyed and loved by most, so before I go over the issues I had with the film, I want to really focus in on the many positives. The action is standout. We get at least 3 extended Tom Cruise running sequences, which are always a joy. And if you've seen any of the marketing for Dead Reckoning, you will know that Cruise jumped off a mountain on a bike, and this was certainly a memorable moment in the movie, with all the build-up and self-aware acknowledgement that what he was doing was ridiculous. The supporting cast are also superb, with 1 or 2 exceptions. Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames and Rebecca Ferguson deliver as always, and Hayley Attwell steals the show as a newcomer to the Mission Impossible franchise. Most will know her from Captain America as Peggy Carter, and this is her first major blockbuster role since that movie, and I imagine we'll be seeing a lot of her over the next 10 years, as she's a perfect action star. There are a lot of comparisons that can be made with Dead Reckoning and Indiana Jones and a Dial of Destiny, and in every area, Dead Reckoning is much better. In both movies, there is a funny chase sequence involving a silly vehicle, a small yellow Fiat in Mission Impossible, and a tuk-tuk in Indiana Jones. There is a train sequence where Ethan Hunt and Indiana fight the baddie on top of a runaway train before having to jump off said train, and they both search for 2 halves of a device, which will lead them to a world-changing technology. An indictment for Dial of Destiny as much as it is praise for Mission Impossible, but the latter is better in every single way. Dead Reckoning has much more likeable characters, an aging protagonist who can still fight, instead of being incapacitated or knocked out for the last half hour, and they both have a young English pickpocket, Phoebe Waller-Bridge in Dial of Destiny and Hayley Attwell in Dead Reckoning. And now onto my criticisms of the film, and I'll start with a nitpick I had, which was the occasional odd cuts, which seemed to be missing something in between. such as Ilsa and Gabriel's fight. Grace, who was almost killed by Gabriel before Ilsa takes him on, just sort of leaves the fight, and then comes back when Hunt finds Ilsa dead on the floor. Where did she go during Ilsa and Gabriel's fight? Was she hiding, or did she run away and then return just at the same time when Hunt found Ilsa? I don't know. And all that was needed was a 10-second scene to show Grace running away or being trapped behind a gate or something like that, to show that she couldn't help Ilsa. And another odd scene for me was when Gabriel was inside the box on the train, and was wearing a helmet with tubes connected to it, where it looked like he was communicating with the entity. But that's all we get of Gabriel and the entity's relationship. A 5-second scene where Paris takes him out of a techie box, and that's it. And it makes me wonder whether this relationship was developed further in scenes which have now been cut, perhaps showing that Gabriel is now more machine than man, and is almost being mind controlled by the entity. And that brings us nicely on to my main issue with Dead Reckoning Part 1, the villain, both Gabriel and the AI itself.
You're fighting to save an ideal that doesn't exist. Never did.
Now, the self-aware, sentient AI that could take over the world is certainly a cliche that would have to be written very well not to come across as tired and unoriginal. They do go into a lot of detail with its origins, as the opening sequence shows us the AI tricking a Russian submarine crew into sinking itself. But these scenes, like every scene with the AI, completely lack in any malevolence or emotion or anything at all. When the submarine crew are panicking as they are about to be hit with their own missile, we cut to the AI, which looks like a big USB stick. It just doesn't have the emotional weight of a villain cackling away or looking ominously pleased with the destruction they are about to cause. The entity is a cold, calculating, ghostly program. So despite the very high stakes, with the entity being such a powerful weapon, I couldn't empathise or feel any real emotion at all towards it. It also slows down the pace of the film, as the entity can't explain itself, so it requires a lot of expositional questions and answers from other characters to explain what it's done and what it's going to do. At the start of the movie, when heads of different sections of the US intelligence agency meet, they discuss the entity's threat level, and it goes on for about 5 minutes too long. And even with this exposition-heavy scene, I still don't know what the entity's plan is. I will say, however, that the uncertainty of what the AI actually wants in its ultimate endgame could be really interesting, and I'm sure it will be explored in Dead Reckoning Part 2. But as of Part 1, its motivations are completely unknown. And I don't think we can just delay opinions on the film until Part 2 comes out in 2024. Because Part 1 is an almost 3-hour movie and it should be able to stand up by itself. So I believe it's a valid criticism, even if the AI's motivation may be explained later in Part 2. And then we have Gabriel, who is the embodiment of the entity's actions. How did Gabriel and the entity come together? We don't know. There are a few possibilities, which aren't developed more than a few lines here or there, as why Gabriel could be working for the entity. During the overly long US intelligence meeting, it is said that the entity can manipulate and blackmail, so perhaps it did this to Gabriel. And then later on, Isla and Hunt say that Gabriel just loves killing and causing suffering, so perhaps the entity chose him as its minion because he's got the right skill set and murderous outlook to carry out its plan. But again, after almost 3 hours, I know Gabriel's name, and that's about all I know about him. Gabriel is played by Isai Morales, who is 61 years old, the same age as Tom Cruise in fact. But the silver fox look of Gabriel prevents him from becoming an intimidating physical threat to Hunt. Especially as a man mountain Henry Cavill was in Mission Impossible Fallout, and Hunt managed to go toe-to-toe with him. So a grey-haired 60-year-old just doesn't have the look of someone who could trouble Hunt. So both the entity and Gabriel didn't really work for me, and that's the main issue I have with the movie. So now onto the ratings. Plot scored 7, entertainment value scores 8, characters and performances 8, visuals 9, and sound just about gets an 8. The Mission Impossible theme is obviously iconic, and like me, you'll probably be singing it in your head for the next few days. And there are a few nice additions to the score with Grace and the entity's theme, but it's too much at times. Often when one song fades out, the next pulsating tune pumps in straight away without any real pause. And the ending scores 8. So my overall rating for Dead Reckoning Part 1 is 80%. When looking at the Film Club leaderboard, Dead Reckoning stands at 6th place on the overall leaderboard, being let down by the villain and a cliché plot. When comparing to films I've reviewed this year, it comes in at 3rd place, below Across the Spider-Verse and John Wick 4. John Wick serves as a pretty good comparison in terms of similarities between the two movies, and both are known for great choreography and set pieces. Dead Reckoning scores the same as Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which despite tanking at the box office, I really enjoyed Dungeons & Dragons. My rating of 80% seems to be on the lower end of the reviews I've seen, and I would still recommend watching a film at the cinema. The IMDb user rating so far is 8.2 out of 10, and the Rotten Tomatoes critic score after 190 reviews is 98%, which means 186 out of the 190 critics who have seen the film like the film. I also imagine the audience score will be in the 90s or even high 80s. So have you had a chance to see Dead Reckoning, and what did you think of the film? Did you in fact enjoy the villain, or like me, did you find it to be a very good film, but not quite great? Let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and tapping the notification bell. It's early days for Film Club, so this really helps the channel to grow. We review all the best movies and TV shows, as well as the occasional video essay. So for more reviews like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you, and see you again.